happening on any platform yet, but I'm super excited to be here with Patty Suau, the absolute original. So excited to be here with you today, Patty, and for our discussion about whatever it is you want to talk about. But usually these are about practical creativity, and you're a creative person. And so here we are. So I want to turn it over to you. And would you please just share a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to accept the invitation to talk to me today?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. So I am a visual artist, a fine artist. I specialize in elegant erotica. So it's really not graphic. It's much more heart-centered. And Marta and I have known each other for many years. And yesterday she just called me out of the blue, and it was such a delicious conversation. I think I cried of joy like twice. That's
Totally.
And I remember a couple years back listening to people that would say I cry out of joy and thinking, what a jackass. Seriously. And now I'm here all the time shedding beautiful, happy tears because there's really a lot of space for love. And there's so much opportunity to choose fear, but there's just as much opportunity to choose love.
Love that.
There's a thing that I heard the other day, and I thought it was fabulous,
Oh
which is fear is not the opposite of love. Fear is the absence of love.
So good.
And it blew my mind. It blew my mind because love and fear are so similar, right? They're acts of passion. And the lack of love is really, love, I think, the word love falls flat because the meaning of it is so big and it's tied to so many wonderful things. And just kind of like, I love you sometimes doesn't resonate because it's maybe not even said with love.
Yeah.
But like, to think of the magnitude of what love is and can be, and how, to a certain degree, we're kind of scared of love because it's big. Anyway, That's been on my mind.
I love that. It's also so nuanced. So I did a video a couple weeks ago on just like what is the nature of love, and I created a little tool where people could come up with their like love plan to be like heart-centered throughout the week, and they got a day off, so it was really just 6 days. But the Greeks had 7 kinds of love. So
Yeah.
It's very complex. But I love what you're saying about like the absence of love, absence of fear. I don't know, for me, love is a full thing and fear is an empty thing.
Yeah.
And so they say that like fear and excitement are the same, but fear just doesn't have air, right?
Yeah.
So I really like that way of thinking about it. But I think right now there is an opportunity to think about like what are the things that make us full. Because I made this deck of cards, and like it's all about ways to get into a loving space, but it's all about how do you, when you're full of love, like there's no the whole idea of fear is so far from anything that you can possibly imagine or have sink in, because you're full. When you're full, you're not empty. And to me, like fear is emptiness.
Yeah. And I think it's really easy to say it. It's much easier to say it than to do it, because it may take years of looking at your shadow, and like the work is never over. But to be able to look back and reflect at how much we've grown is really an existential feeling, like, oh wow, I was 30 and I was a child. Wow. Yeah, the reason why I got into art in the first place is because it was always a meditative thing for me. It was a form of communication, of course, existing in a multilingual, multicultural reality, right? But it was really something that called to me, calmed me, made me realize and just express myself in ways that I know were really healthy for me. At some point, I quit my job, and it was a radical experience. And I thought, well, let me sell my work because it's really, I'm not ready to go back to work.
Mm.
So I chose the art life. And it has been simultaneously the most difficult 3 years of my life and also the most beautiful 3 years of my life, because I had to look at my shadow. I didn't have a boss telling me what to do, but then I also had to explore my own boundaries and figure out what is self-care. And so much of it was creative self-expression, which is what we're talking about today. And that it's not easy. It's so much easier to get up and have a to-do list with an agenda and go, check off the things on my list, and then I'm empty. I don't have to do anything anymore.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah, for sure. I've realized I want to take notes as we talk. So well, I'll get my paper out. Yeah, that is so right. I want to hear more about the shadow in a second, and kind of what you mean by that. That might be new for some of the folks who are listening. So I think we have a couple people who just joined us. Hey guys.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, hi, here with Patty. So we're talking about the shadow, but also just that sense that you're responsible for yourself, and that's a responsibility, right? That is a privilege. So I'm talking to a lot of people who are kind of thinking about career shifts, or they're not sure what to do. When they're not sure what to do, they come to like a strategic person like me, but I've been doing exactly what you're talking about, which is getting into more heart-centered work. And if you're going to kind of surrender to this fullness of being full of love, there are things about yourself that you have to recognize and address, and then heal and solve and just gently appreciate, because it's part of your journey. But I love what you're saying, because you chose to be an artist because you felt full.
Yes.
In that creative, self-expressive kind of mode. We talk a lot about kind of like masculine energy, feminine energy, the yin, the yang. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And then can you go into more about the shadow and what you mean by that and how you have addressed it? Because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. So we, like, everybody has estrogen and testosterone. We have feminine and masculine energies. Every single human does, on a different scale. For the most part, if you identify as female, you probably have more feminine energy, right? Or it's easier to live in a more feminine space, right? And if you identify as a masculine, you probably live in the masculine space. However, we have agreed to live in a system, that's a different conversation, that is masculine. So our systems are going to reward us with masculine efforts, like do something, accomplish something, make your to-do list, check things off, do, right? And on the opposite side is the feminine, which is being, right? But in the society that we live in, we're rewarded for the doing and not necessarily rewarded for the being. So usually beingness is something that we pay for. We pay to go on vacation. We pay to unplug. We have a certain amount of vacation days, and if we want more rest, we don't get paid for it, right? So the idea of stepping into our feminine energy, paying for self-care, or saying, I'm taking a break, I'm shutting off, and I'm restoring, is something that is tricky if it goes against the rules, quote unquote, right? So it could be really scary. We don't necessarily place value on that because it's something that's a luxury. We pay for it, but it's really something that's necessary. It feeds the feminine part of your psyche. I mean, if for the guys that are watching this, think about how delicious is it when you get to go fishing, or like you sit outside, or you're shooting the shit with your friends drinking a beer. You're not doing anything, and you get this really great business idea, right? Mm-hmm. Or like a composition for a new piece or whatever it is. For us women, when we can, or like the feminine, right? When we can shift into our femininity, we have this, it's an internal knowing that's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't go down that street. Let's go the long scenic way, only to find out that your intuition guided you away from a car accident. You know, so there's something really powerful in the feminine that's not necessarily listened to the way that we listen to our masculine. So that can get a little tricky in terms of balancing self-care. What was the second question that you said?
The second question is, tell us more about what you mean by the shadow. And I want to come back to after that. Well, I'll write it down so I don't forget.
Okay.
But tell us about the shadow and what it means, kind of how you've brought that into your work, how you have kind of confronted or like what impact does that shadow have on your life?
Yeah. Sure. Actually, to stay with the line of feminine and masculine, we can look at it this way. We can look at the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine and the wounded feminine and the wounded masculine. So we're looking at a scale and we have two opposite ends. Everyone has a wounded part of them. Every single person. We all carry some kind of trauma or some kind of insecurity. It's part of the existence, right? And we all have our sacredness, our gifts, our joy, our connection, the delicious part of life, right? So we live within this scale, right? And within the wounded part of us, that's where our shadow lives, right? So our shadow is the part of us that we may not accept, or the part of us that, you know, holds on to fear, the part of us that's triggered, the part of us that we may not like very much, or we don't want other people to see, because when we see it, that's a hard pill to swallow. You know, that's...
Sorry to interrupt. Is that kind of like code for like your baggage or like...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, very much. It's very much your baggage.
So we don't want to acknowledge it because it's painful. There's something about us that is uncomfortable, and when somebody else brings it up to us, it's painful and it kind of re-triggers that. But when we can look at it and address it and see it and accept it, not necessarily as a bad thing, but just a part of our experience, then we can actually be proactive about healing it. That's what I'm hearing.
Exactly. Absolutely. So it's the part of our psychology that says, if you're vulnerable, they're going to run away from you. If you tell them the truth, they're not going to accept you. If they find out this about you, you're no longer cool. So it's very much a conversation about integration, acceptance, like how do you function in society, and the baggage that's like, ooh, this is my yucky stuff and I can't show them that.
Reminds me of high school, but anyway.
Oh, teenage years.
Like acceptance, rejection, pain, avoiding pain, like all of that feels very much like high school for me.
Yeah. And it's, if we think about it as a book bag, and I think Brene Brown was the one that was saying this, if we think about it as a book bag, we're carrying so much shit on our backs that eventually we start to hunch over. Yeah. We have the pounds of guilt and shame, and we're just kind of like walking around like this, and suddenly, you know, you can't really see. And so often when you open up that bag, you're like, oh no, never mind, I'm gonna close up this bag. So it takes us a really long time to look at it, and you know, very often it's so much easier with help, you know. But as you start taking the things out of the bag is so much lighter. Then suddenly, you know, you can stand with purpose, because every single human being has an insecurity. The way that I dealt with it was looking at, it's gonna sound vulgar, but like everyone poops the same way. So we're gonna stink. We're gonna be smeary. We're gonna have poop all over our butts. You know, like there's that part that's not that much fun, but it's the human existence. So
it's part of the whole game. It's kind of what you sign up for.
Yeah.
Cool. So tell us, like, how are you bringing the shadow into your work? So, and you also play with the masculine and the feminine. You do, you know, miniature and sometimes not so miniature, tasteful erotica. So how are you playing with all these forces? And maybe people are kind of like feeling these energies and they're working with them and they don't even know that's what those are. So can you kind of like describe the feeling of that and kind of how you bring it into your own creative work?
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. Okay. So creativity in general is a feminine aspect. So is self-care, right? And I used to think that I was deathly allergic to vulnerability, like deathly allergic, right? So I kind of broke myself. Like I had to get to a level where I had to be vulnerable in order for my life to work. I was coming from pain and trauma and all the shit that wasn't working out. And so as I visualized myself in a healthier environment and a healthier mindset, I drew it just because naturally I'm gonna draw.
Hmm.
Um, but then I realized, oh wow, this is great. I feel really good. This makes so much sense and it's resonating with other people. And then the aha moment came when it was like, oh wait, I'm taking care of my psychological well-being. How revolutionary. Okay, what does self-care look like? Because I didn't know. I mean, my mom has her regimen, but it's not anything out of this world. Like I didn't necessarily see it, and I didn't see it as something sacred. Like it's so the idea of taking care of myself was never presented as something sacred to the point that it landed for me. So I never thought that I was sacred
Mm.
until it landed.
Yeah.
And so my great friend Gabby Swan was like, listen, why don't you go on a pleasure quest? You seem to really excel when you know, connect with pleasure. And I thought 30 days, accountability, I'm going to post on the internet. And even though nobody really cares, I know that it's really important for me. So that's really how it started. And then this power came up like, oh, wow. Wow. I'm like, I, okay, so the caveat
You
in there,
found power and pleasure.
the most important thing that I've discovered is how my physical body, because I'm a woman, I have this portal to God.
Mm.
I have the ability to bring life, and because I'm connected to it all the time, I didn't
Mm.
see it before. I took it for granted because there is no distance there. After a breakup with an ex-fiance, after some not pleasant activities, um, I realized, oh, wait, I'm at what now that I left my body, now that I became other, I can see myself again. And I'm sitting in myself with myself. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of yucky baggage stuff that I really don't like. But there's also this really beautiful power of like,
Mm.
part of me, if it sounds crude, but like, if I sit on your face, you're going to meet the face of God. Like, that's power, you know? So I create from that power. I really try to sit with my pleasure, with my self-care. And it's the hardest thing that I do. It's the most difficult thing in life to really make my self-care a priority so that I can sit in my splendor.
I love that. And I love also that, and I've experienced this myself, kind of like sometimes what is painful causes the breakthrough and that moment where you have a realization that changes things. It changes who you are, it changes your identity, it changes kind of like the nature of your work. So
Yeah.
like I completely resonate with that. Um, what else? Also, tell us what you mean by self-care. So you've said that word a lot. What does that actually look like? And because, you know, you brought up at the beginning, like our culture doesn't reward self-care. It doesn't reward relaxation. It rewards this idea that the American dream is about doing
Yeah.
and about achieving and excelling, and that the work that you do is your virtue.
Yeah.
And your value, right? So tell us more about what does self-care look like? Because I think especially a lot of women believe that caring for themselves is selfish.
Oh
And
no.
it's the worst thing that you could, like, you're letting people down when you actually care for yourself. And you know, that's something that I think a lot of women and there are plenty of other folks too, who feel like caring for themselves is somehow,
The most selfish thing that you could do.
yeah. So what does self-care look like, and kind of walk us through what that looks like in your work, Because it sounds like your work is actually part of that as well. It's healing. You said that, you discover and you heal through your work. So tell us more about self-care.
Yeah. So there's so much to unpack there, and I'm really glad that you asked the question, because so often self-care, a commercial will tell you that self-care is a face mask. And yeah, absolutely. Or a massage. But I think self-care could be something as minimal as putting a boundary, or I mean, and minimal isn't the word, because placing a boundary is something gargantuan, right? Um, but this is what I always go, this is what I think about often when I think about self-care. Our great grandmothers were property. They were breeders, right? And for women specifically, this resonates in such a way because, hold on, I'm gonna close the door real quick because there's background.
That sounds good. Yeah, women didn't vote until 100 years ago. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, our great grandmothers
In this country.
But that's very similar in many other countries. Anyway, so a lot of us women, and this is specifically for women, have been taught that the scraps of time that are left over after taking care of everybody else are the time that we deserve, right? So booking a time in your calendar for self-care is a revolutionary act, because it's like, how dare you not take your kids to soccer practice because you want to chill and stare at the wall? I mean, what a bad mother, right? It's programmed in us. And there's so much stigma, there's guilt and there's shame attached to that.
Yeah.
Because it comes from when our grandmothers, great grandmothers, and mothers were the breeder, were the maid, were the property. And we're rolling that back. And it's a confusing time because we're independent, but we still have the remnants of those cultural ideas, right? So I think that for the biggest thing in self-care is reclaiming time. And I'll give you an example. So if you have kids, right, and you block off an hour of time every day for mommy time, in theory, it sounds like a really selfish thing to do, but it's actually the most selfless thing to do, because after the alone time to rest and restore, then you're a much better mom to your kids because you have the patience to deal with everything, where you wouldn't have before. You would have snapped, you would have said something that maybe not healthy, whatever. I mean, it's hard to claim this because it is a luxury, but it makes you a much more capable person. Like if you meditate, I don't know if you guys meditate, but for example, I meditate 10 minutes a day, and I have found that it saved me 2 hours of worry time a day. What an investment for 10 minutes. And since I'm not worried, I'm not falling into fear. At least I'm not like face planting into fear. Now I can see, oh, that's a fear thing. Okay. I get to decide whether I want to believe that or not, or like keep my distance, right? Because it gives me a clarity. I got to rest. It's like sleeping. If you can sleep a solid 6 to 8 hours every day, how much better do you function as a person? So much better. That's what we're talking about in terms of self-care. If you can take a pause for yourself, specifically with time, claiming time for yourself, once you've had me time, once you've had a minute to replenish yourself, then you can be really strong for everybody else. But if you have an empty cup, look at this. If I need this much water, I can't give you water. Right. So I'm going to have this much and you're going to have this much. We're not going to get anywhere.
Right.
Right. But if I'm feeding you from my surplus, I'm always going to have space for you. You're always going to feel like you can come to me. Yeah. Right. And it's weird because our cups aren't usually always full. So there's a dynamic there. And the other part of self-care is communication, boundaries, to be able to say, listen, I can't, not right now, or not today, or give me 5 minutes, or let me think about it, or, saying no. That's a really powerful thing to do that a
Yeah.
lot of us are scared shitless of,
That's true.
you know?
True. Because we're nice people and we want to give. And, that's what we're used to doing. So that's what we practice. So what I'm hearing from you, and I love this, is that for us to be our best and to really serve, all the good things that we want to do, be the people that we want to be, there is a process through this act of self-care that is only, I don't know, the way I'm hearing it is like self-care is refilling your own cup
Yes.
because no one else can actually do that for you. And
No
if you're,
one can. Even if you want them to, there's no way that that's possible. And also, that's a lot of responsibility that you're placing on somebody else. So you're losing your sovereignty.
right. And you're looking to what you can't control is whether they understand what you need and when and what and how, right? So I think that's really, really excellent. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about optimizing ourselves. So to be optimal, you have to take time out to fill your own cup. Number one, because it's your responsibility.
Yes.
It's your responsibility. Responsibility is a privilege. And then number two,
And also a
because
birthright. It's a privilege and a birthright.
yeah, yeah. And it's a choice. So the question is, if you're not feeling full, you're not optimal. And if you're not optimal, you're not really helping people by being the full self that you can be, whatever your roles in life are. And I think I'm going to bring it back to, we just have a couple minutes here. I want to bring this back to where we started the conversation, which is in the sense of fullness and how in love and fullness of love, fear cannot exist because fear is about absence and lack and disconnection. It's an empty thing in the way that I experience fear. So when you actually fill your cup and you're from a full place, you're going to be less likely to be in a fear place.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be less likely to be in an anxious place. That isn't like you have fullness and you have it forever, like a college degree or something, but just knowing when you're full and what makes you full is sounding like, to me, the basis of a good self-care ritual so that you can show up and do the best work and do, be the best person you can be. So any other thoughts about that?
Yes. It all sounds lovely and dandy and blah, 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 but it's actually something that is really challenging. It's full of opportunities for growth, which is enormous in a lifetime, but it's also hard. It's really hard. And one of the things that I find that has the biggest return on my investment is actually sitting with my feelings, connecting with my feelings. If I feel like shit, if I feel like I need to cry, if I'm angry, like really let it go, let it out, experience it. And then, I give myself a deadline. It's not like I'm going to feel this for 6 months. And if I do, I get help, because it's hard.
Yeah.
But it's also so rewarding to be able to challenge yourself by looking and acknowledging your feelings, because it's really the little kid inside of you that's like, let me be heard so I can stop, so I can be at peace, right? And because we're almost out of time, I'll say my number one practical lesson that I've learned while doing this is asking if somebody can hold space for me. And that means, hey, listen, I need to cry or I need to say something. Can you just listen and witness me? Don't try to fix me. You don't have to say anything. Just witness me letting go of this energy. You're not allowed to fix me. It's not your job. Don't worry about that. Just watch me. And then actually allow myself to have the vulnerability to cry in front of somebody feels like I'm practicing to be safe with my feelings in front of other people so that I can stand in my power with my vulnerability, because ultimately it's what makes me human and we can connect. So, yeah.
Also, I love that because what you're doing is actually bringing another person into being and not doing.
Yes.
So it's like you're partnering on the feminine energy and just being together.
Yeah.
Experiencing just being human together, which I think we don't do enough of. And it's kind of neat to see in this kind of uncertain time that we're in right now, a lot more people are being and then also bringing other people into their being. So let's just close out with one And thank you for the fabulous conversation. You know, I love talking to you, and there's always something juicy that comes up in our discussions. But what is one thing that you think people can do when they're in a place of fear or anxiety, like right now? What is the one thing you would recommend they do to address that, or just to be? Like, what is the advice that you would give? The one thing that
Okay. The one thing that gets me out of my shit every time is to write down what I'm experiencing. And once I fill half of a page or a page, with every page, I ask myself the same question. What am I experiencing right now? Right. Once I get to the next page, what am I experiencing right now? And in a matter of minutes, my emotional state changes in such a crazy way that I realize, oh, not only have I let go of all the shit that's got me anxious, but I also am conscious of the fact that my emotions range so much that if I try to sit on that I'm going to be on a roller coaster all the time.
I love that. And it's a way to kind of document what you see without judging yourself, feeling shame. You're just going through the experience in a really like tangible way. And there is a progression that you can see through that. So that's so awesome. Well, thank you, Patty. This has been a really fun conversation, really insightful. I hope to keep the conversation going. If anyone has questions for Patty or me, just leave them in the comments. Otherwise, it's been so great to talk to you, and I hope you have an amazing day.
Bye. Okay. That was so much fun.
Bye, Patty.